Hello and well met. This is Founder Leveroon with Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to go over some of the basic things that come with Fantasy Grounds before you buy any content other than a license. So this assumes that you have a subscription or a standard license or the ultimate. If you do not have that, some of this functionality may not be present, but I'm going to show you just kind of what comes with the program for the beginning part of it. So without further ado, let's get going. So in Fantasy Grounds, you have basically a blank slate. I'm actually using the a paid theme, which I didn't think about before I created the video, but this is a themed, basically a background. It's normally the leather background. And as far as this decal goes, I put this in for the college. So if you come down to the bottom right, you have a library. Right now, you'll notice that I have the SRD bestiary, which is basically your monster manual. The SRD data is where all your players' stuff is stored, and some spells and the reference manual. And then you also have some magic items that you can use. So those are the base that you get with Fantasy Grounds when you first buy it, and you don't buy any modules or anything like that. And then it also comes with the basic rules, which is like maybe 1/32 of all of the content that you get with the monster manual, the player's handbook, and the dungeon master's guide. Mostly the player's handbook, but there are some things in here that you can use to build a character with. So even with this, though, you're very limited. Player's handbook is going to have all of that, and when you load the player's handbook, you can actually get rid of some of this content. So if you only own the player's handbook, you can keep the bestiary and the magic items, and you won't need necessarily the player stuff. So that's basically what comes with Fantasy Grounds. Another thing is some maps. There is a section in the assets library. And if you open up the assets library and you navigate to images, which is on the top right here, so under images, if you scroll across your content, and hopefully you don't have as much as I do because I got a ridiculous amount of content, but I'm going to go to the letter F, which is for Fantasy Grounds. And hopefully what I'm going to come up with is a section where you're going to have some content that comes with the actual base program. So you really don't have to buy anything right away. You can kind of check things out. What I recommend you do is that you get a demo, maybe just pay for 1 month subscription, play around with the software, get to know it. If it isn't for you or you think it's too clunky or something, then get your money back. It's that simple. There's no point in complaining and stuff. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you do like it, maybe consider down the road buying Player's Handbook at the basic level. And in the assets here, there's a thing called Fantasy Grounds Battle Maps. These come with the program. So if you want to try Fantasy Grounds out, there's some basic maps that come with it. And then there's also the SRD and the basic rules. The SRD and the basic rules have some redundancy in them, so when you're building stuff, you'll notice that. I'm going to build a character. I'm going to use the character wizard, and I'm going to build probably a dwarven cleric because I know that they have all the stuff for that in this content here. If you want to build something really fancy or something, you kind of have to hand put it in. So basically, you'd have to create your own class if you don't know the books. It is certainly doable. You can use the SRD to build your own content, use it as a guideline. But that would be down the road once you understand Fantasy Grounds a little bit more. So I'm just going to show you one thing you can do with it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the character area, which is where you would build characters. There's two ways you can do it. You can start a character sheet and do it manually, or you can use the character wizard. So with all this content loaded, I am going to attempt to build a basic character. And I'm going to click on the character wizard on the top left corner, and it brings up the wizard. So the wizard assumes that you have the player's handbook. I'm going to give it a try with the basic rules in SRD. It may not be optimal, but I'm going to certainly try. So I'm going to give this guy a name. I'm just going to call him Dwarf because I don't have a good name for him right now. I could call him, we can call him Dorig because that's what I usually use. Dwarven moniker for most of my healer cleric types. And once you are done with that, I'm going to go ahead and select a race. So you have a selection here. If you have more content, you'll have more selection usually. If the content is official and it's created properly, that'll populate in here. There'll be a couple other options in here. So you see that elf is repeated twice, and that's because I have two different sources that are giving you that data. So I'm going to go ahead and click on dwarf. And now you're presented with, see, there's two hill dwarfs. That's because I have both of the books loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this hill dwarf. That's what I want to pick. And then it wants me to pick a proficiency based off the race. So I'm going to go with Smith's tools. Actually, Mason's tools. This guy's into stonework and such. Maybe he's a sculptor or something, who knows, or he builds bridges. Okay, so that's basically the base part is the race. Got all the racial stuff out of the way. Now, if you click on stats, it already has a standard array by default. So if you want to roll, you can, and you have some options. So there's a drop-down arrow. You click on that. There's dice roll method, manual entry, point buy. So if you want to do a point buy system, you can decide how many points you are, but in most cases, 27 points is normally what you would start at, and then all your stats are at 8. Or you can go with a dice roll, which would just roll probably like a 4d6, drop the lowest. And that's what I got for that roll. And it will populate here. In the stat area, you can adjust those. You can move them around. Or you can go to the standard array, which is what you normally start with. So there's different ways of, or you can manually enter. So I think I'm going to try the point buy system. So this particular character, I'm going to make it a cleric because I know that you have all the things with the basic rules in the SRD to build a cleric. If you try to build something extraordinary or out of norm, you're going to have to build all that content before you build your character. So that takes a little bit of understanding of Fantasy Grounds. So it says I have unspent ability points. So I need to click on 20. Click up here, and I'm going to assign 27. So my game master says, well, I'm going to give you 27 discretionary points to set up your character. So I'm going to go ahead and boost everything up to 10 or so, just to see where I'm at, just to get everything kind of going. Might leave his charisma at 9. I don't really mind having a not so charismatic dwarf. So there's 11 points to work with. So I'm going to definitely want to add a couple to con. And I'm going to add just a little bit because I know dwarves normally get constitution bonuses, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then I'm going to give him at least a couple points in wisdom because that's basically what the class is based on. And I'm going to give him a couple points in deck, so he's not totally just relying on armor. So I still have quite a bit of this point buy, so I'm going to go up to 12 in strength, maybe 13. No, 12 is good. And then his con and his wisdom. I'll go up. So it's still, we're in the ballpark of where we want to be for stats. So I'm going to go to his wisdom one more time. So that way it assures me that I get better spell casting and sort of thing. And then the next thing I'm going to do is grab, and let's go with another point in con. And now I only have 2 points left. So I think I'll bring my charisma up 1. And then maybe my intelligence by 1. And that takes out all the points that I had. So that's kind of a balanced way of looking at this. And then the next thing is when I pick race, it's already added the ability score adjustment. So I'm at 12 strength, 12 dex, 16 con, 11 intelligence, 15 wisdom, and 10 charisma. So I'm going to take 1 point off of this, I think, and move it somewhere else. So I don't need a 16 con. So I have 2 points. I think I will put that in wisdom. So now I have a 16 wisdom, 15 con. So you can play around with this, and that's what's nice about the wizard. The old method is once you dragged over your race and class and such, you didn't have this ability to make adjustments without rebuilding your character. So that's one of the benefits that we get it from the character builders. You're not committed until you hit the save button. So anything you're doing right now is kind of trial and error or kind of looking to see how the numbers stack up. So that's the stats. Now the next thing is class. So I know that the SRD and the basic rules have all the stuff for Cleric, so I'll go ahead and pick the Cleric. When I say all the stuff, I'm talking about the domains and it has enough things to where you can build an entire character. And see, I only have one specialization I can pick from, and that's because I'm limited from the fact that I don't have a lot of content. So I'm at level 1. Normally that's where clerics get their specialty. So I'm going to go ahead and click the life domain because that's part of my build. And I have the character selected for cleric. And now it wants me to pick 2 choices of skills. So I'm going to go ahead and pick history, or actually religion for 1. And then history, I think, will be. So there's my 2 skills. I ran out of choices, which is right. And now for background. So this particular character was somebody, he's either going to be a folk hero or a soldier. Could be an acolyte, but or a noble, but I don't see him being kind of stuffy. I see him being more realistic and world-like. So he's not as as conceited or as forthright as an acolyte or a noble might be from a dwarven kingdom. He's more, 2 feet on the floor kind of guy. So I'm going to give him the soldier background. And what happened is he was wounded, but he didn't want to, become a statistic. He continued fighting, but not on the front lines. And he actually became a battle medic. So he started helping his friends and his family and his people when they go down. So that's kind of a cool little backstory for him. And now I got to pick what type of tool proficiency he gets. These are all gaming sets. I think he's more of a chess kind of player, or maybe dice. But I think playing cards may not be his thing. So I'm just going to go with dragon chess. So it's very rare that he gets to play, but when he does, that's his favorite game. So these are choices that you have to make as you go along building your character, and you're keeping in mind your backstory if you have one, those sort of things. So that takes care of the majority of the character build. It's really that simple. The reason it's so simple now is because I don't have a bunch of content and I don't have a lot of choices. So I'm making this very basic so that if you don't own any content, you're not on the hook for that. The base thing is, if you're going to build a character and you want to keep building lots of different characters, even if you're just a player, eventually you'll want to get the player's handbook. You don't really have to buy everything else. Usually your game master will do that, and a lot of the burden comes down to the host. So don't feel intimidated or like you have to run out and go buy something, because technically you don't need anything. You just use the demo. And your DM will fashion the books for you to use. So in this library, the DM can share whatever content he has for you, so you can reference or build your characters. So this is just a way to get the process going. So you got most of the things that we want in place. Now the inventory. So this is where a lot of people get confused. You have kind of 2 things here. You have your class choices, and this doesn't mean you have the items. This is just the things that you're proficient with, or the things that you would prefer to buy. So there's a class choice number 1. So I'm going to pick the Warhammer because that goes with him. Now, instead of going through and picking everything right now, I'm going to go to purchase equipment, because I want to buy that Warhammer now so I don't forget. So if I click on purchase equipment, it's going to bring me to the gear. I want to go over to weapons. So there's gear, weapons, and armor. And then I'm going to type Warhammer, or just the partial. And there's the Warhammer. So all I have to do is single left click and drag and drop it. And that actually adds, it tells you the cost sort of, and it gives you, the description of the item and how much it weighs. So that takes care of that first part. So now I'm going to click back to starting equipment. And the reason I go back and forth is so I don't forget my choices. So now I can get scale, leather, or chain. Well, this particular character build allows me to wear heavy armor, but I also realize that heavy armor can slow me down. So chain doesn't sound too bad. Leather's good. Scale mail seems a little bulky. So I'm going to go with chainmail. And again, I'll go to purchase equipment. under armor, so you got to make sure you switch between these. And I'm going to click on the filter, and I'm going to type in whatever it is I want for armor. So in this case, it was chain. So obviously, I'm going to type in chain, and there's the chainmail right here. Make sure you grab the right one. And as you're adding armor and weapons, Fantasy Grounds normally will equip it automatically. So I have these little shirts here, so that tells you it's equipped. So now I'm going to go back to starting equipment. And now here are my other choices for a weapon. So I already picked a Warhammer. This is kind of my secondary choice. So I'm going to go with some light hammers. So there's my third choice in that list of choices. I'm going to go to purchase equipment, go to weapons, and I'm going to pick light hammer. Now you don't have to do it this way. The only reason I do it this way is so I don't forget. I don't have to backtrack, try to figure out what I did and what I didn't do. So I picked this light hammer, and I'm going to get 3 of them total, or at least 2. So I think 2 is good. So you can throw the hammer, so that's why I did it that way. So he's got 2 light, kind of like throwing hammers, and then he's got a big war hammer. So we'll call him Bam Bam, Doric Bam Bam the Dwarf. Okay, so he's got his armor. He's got his couple of his weapons. And I'm going to go back to armor again, and he's able to use shield, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the shield while I'm here. I didn't even think about that first. Okay, so here's the shield, drag and drop, and it's already equipped. So it will reflect your AC as you're building, or your armor class. So now the next thing, go back to starting equipment, and now I get a choice of a package. So the priest pack or the explorer's pack. I don't see him as being a super religious person. I mean, yeah, he's a priest, but I don't know. I'm kind of torn between the explorer's pack and the priest pack. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, he is a cleric, but he doesn't really. Oh yeah, no problem, Alan. Yeah, this will be kind of helpful. So if your characters are going to be built, and you're having a little bit of trouble, or maybe you want them to be more autonomous, they can watch these kind of things. It'll help them along. So yeah, no problem, man. So the other thing is, when you're building content like this, it's just kind of getting used to the interface. That's all we're doing. We're not, playing online with the stream and everything. We're just kind of getting used to the interface. The character wizard's pretty new. If you find any errors, report it to Smiteworks through the proper channels, which would be to go to the forums, go to the House of Healing under Unity, and then look around at the threads, and also start a new thread and post your logs and maybe a screenshot what your problem is, and they'll get on it pretty quickly. They want this. Smiteworks wants this to work, so in order for them to be aware of what's going on with it, we have to, as a community, as users, it's good that if we let them know, because sitting back and complaining about it isn't going to fix it. So try to consider maybe passing that on to Smiteworks if you see any errors. This doesn't really take in consideration third-party content. So if you're loading something from the DM's Guild or something that you created, I'm not saying they're not going to help you with it, but less likely you're going to get any direct support for that. You can come into the college and we'll help you troubleshoot it. But if it's something that that you brought in yourself, it's less likely to get as much attention. Now, if it's official content, yes, they will definitely try to support that. Okay, so I'm going to go with the priest pack despite my reserve, just because it has some of the other things that's needed in a clerical profession. So I'll go ahead and click that. And the pack actually includes a bunch of things, so we don't have to worry about that. But I have to still purchase it. So that was a choice. That was not the actual gear. So now I need to go to gear, and I need to type pack up here, or maybe priest. There it is. So I need to drag and drop that in here. So just because you started off with that equipment doesn't necessarily mean you own it. So if you want to actually have it in your inventory, you need to go back to the equipment. Now for a holy symbol. He's going to go for the reliquary. It's going to be basically painted on his shield. And then he also gets a background choice for a gaming set. So he already has proficiency in the chess. I think I'll go with the dice. That was my second choice. And again, if I want to go to if I want him to have that type of gear, I have to put it in his inventory. So I'll just say dice here, and that's a dice set. And then there was a chess set. I don't know if you'd want to carry that around necessarily, but he is. So that's pretty good. And then, you can go through and refine this after the fact, but that's his base gear that he gets from his starting equipment. And if you come back here, I've made all the choices. So that's all this is trying to do, is prompt you to go out and seek the items that you get when you start. So if you're starting your career, or if it's a new character build, this just gives you a guideline as to what you are going to choose for your background in your class. And also, some of it's based on your own decision. But that doesn't put the inventory in your actual inventory. You have to go to purchase equipment, make sure you're in the right group because you have armor, weapons, and gear, and then drag and drop the content into your inventory. I think a lot of people get confused with that. They think if you pick your starting equipment that you're getting the item too. It's actually not true. You're getting the selection of the item, or you're notating that on your sheet as to what you chose. So just remember that. That's probably the biggest hurdle that people fight with, is the inventory. So next is spells. So spells are based off of your class and such. So you have cantrips, and it lists how many you have available and how many spells you have available. Those are separate. So I'm going to pick a couple cantrips. So I'm going to pick, let's see, I get 3 of them. So there's a list up here, which gives me the base list. This comes from the SRD and the basic rules, so I don't have a lot of selection, but I'm going to go ahead and pick guidance as one of my 3. I'm going to pick spare the dying, and then one other, probably sacred flame, something offensive. So sacred flame, spare the dying, and guidance. Those are my 0 level or first level cantrips. And then those are the ones I get at first level. I don't think I get any more until much later on. Now for this first level spell slot, I click on this little brick up here next to cantrips. That filters out the spells. So I'm going to drag and drop these down. I get 4 of them total. These are spells that I can use, when I need to. So my domain spell for Life Cleric is a freebie. So if I drag and drop this down here, technically it shouldn't deduct these spells from here, but those are the spells available. But the life domain is usually free when you have a domain spell. Cure Wounds is another one. And then I'm going to pick, let's see, Protection from Evil and Good. And one other, Bless. We already have Bless, Bane, Command, Cure Wounds. I think Guiding Bolt is a good one. So I'm sure I can probably get one more out of this because of, the fact that I have some domain spells in here. I'm not going to worry about that right now, just for the tutorial, but you probably get another spell or 2 because of that fact, because domain spells are normally free. This doesn't calculate that in, obviously, but this is a good start. So I got all my spells selected. And then if you have any feats, you would go here and would obviously drag the feats over that belong to your character. After that, you're going to hit save when you're all happy with everything. And then the regular character sheet pops up. So this is where you would basically start customizing and adding any additional things. Right now, Doric doesn't have a photo, so I'm going to double click on the portrait, which is on the top left up here. Double click on the bag, and then there is a Fantasy Grounds folder here that says FG Fantasy. If I double click on that, it's going to take Fantasy Grounds a few seconds to curse through that directory of all the images. That's one thing, got to be patient with Fantasy Grounds. If you have a ton of images in a folder, it takes it a minute to kind of go through everything and scan it. Now this is your generic types of Dwarven stuff, and you have different races here. So I'm just going to drag this, I'm just double click, and that'll assign this. And if you don't have a token, your portrait automatically becomes that. So that's what that's all about. And now that I have him here, I'm going to, let's see, got all that figured out. Stats are there. And just kind of look over here. So here at this point, I could add the dice set and the chess set and the smith tools. So I think I'll do that. So I'm going to add item, just add 3 lines, and I'm going to make these rollable skills so I don't have to do it manually. So I'll say dice set. Dragon chess was his other proficiency, and mason's tools. So these are just things that you probably won't use very often, but if you do any crafting or maybe there's a situation. So for dice set, I'm going to use dexterity for his base. And dragon chess, I think intelligence or wisdom, so probably wisdom. And mason's tools are going to be wisdom based as well. So these are just, you can assign whatever stat you want, and if you need to use a different stat in a situation, you can change the stat before you make the roll and then set it to whatever you want for next time. So that's how you add custom skills if you need to. Your abilities are all listed here. These are clickable with the dragon on the right-hand side. If you have the book, it'll pull up the description. If you don't have the book and you have it on your sheet, Fantasy Grounds give you a little warning that tells you, yeah, you need to have this book open or you need to purchase this book. Dwarven Resilience, that comes with his race. So all this stuff was added as I was building the character, as well as these proficiencies being listed here. And then you have your languages. So that's all filled out. I didn't have to do much of anything. You could actually go back in here and read some of these, like the Domain of Life gives you access to heavy armor. Or in this case, your Divine Domain or Disciple of Life. It says that your healing spells are a little bit more effective. So you gain a bonus to your healing spells. And it doesn't count as cantrips. It's first level or higher. So it doesn't work on the lower level stuff. Well, by the rules, it doesn't. There's all your inventory. And as you see, the backpack that I had that was full of priest stuff has expanded. If you go and actually edit some of these things, you can put them in the backpack. So in other words, I want to nest some of this stuff. So I'm going to type the word backpack next to the items on the right-hand side under location, and make sure it's spelled the same way as the container. So I'm not going to put everything in there, but I'm just going to put the stuff that I don't really need right now. And I noticed that there's a couple items that I might want that are missing. So I'll ask my GM, and if he says yes, I can open up the items banner. And if you have anything loaded, like content, you can pull from here. So I'm going to go with a pouch, because I think I want a pouch. There we go. So here's a pouch. And then I want a case for my crossbow bolts. So bolt. No. And now I want some bolts to actually use for my ammo. So when you pick the crossbow bolts, what it does is it sets up how much ammo you're going to have. So right now it's set to, I don't have bolts. That's right. I don't even need that. But if you did have a light crossbow, so I'm going to go ahead and grab him a light crossbow. There we go. Light crossbow. So I'll go ahead and go back to his inventory and say he picked that up later on. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the bolts again. That's right. Just looking at those. I realized that I didn't initially pick bolts, but now I have. So here's crossbow bolts. And then a healing potion. So I'm going to type healing. DM's going to be nice, and he's going to give us a basic healing potion. So there we go. So that's basically his starting equipment. I can take and nest the items in here. So like, for instance, the crossbow bolts are going to go in the case. So there is a case crossbow bolt. So I'm going to type that next to the bolts themselves. And that'll be good. And then the dice set is going to go into a pouch. So I went ahead and grabbed a pouch while I was there. And I'm going to assume if I had any treasure, I'd start with 5 gold, depending on your background. Usually it's a small, no more than 15 normally. But Warhammer stays out. I can put the water skin in the backpack. So I just type back and it'll go in there. So what I'm saying is if you just start typing, it'll auto spell. I got 2 days worth of rations. I'm going to turn that to 5. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in my backpack. So as you're doing this, it'll reshuffle the inventory and organize it for you underneath the containers. So this is another way to kind of make things nicer. So the chest set is going to go in the backpack. The incense pack, potion of healing is going to go in the pouch. And then everything else is going to stay out because I'm not wearing this stuff. So anything that you want to have going and ready is going to be equipped as far as weapons or armor. And my shield, where is that at? I thought I grabbed one. Yep, it's already equipped. So what that means is when you have your items equipped, your armor class will show it. So if I open up this little bubble here, this is basically shield bonus plus your armor bonus. And then I got a +1 on dex. And I don't get any bonus, I guess, because of the armor that I have. So it canceled out my dex bonus. That's all right. The next thing is your actions tab. We already did inventory. Notes, if you want to. Definitely want to have your alignment for spells and such. So he's going to be lawful good. And that's about the only thing on here that really needs to be populated as far as mechanics go. So if there's someone who has protection from good and he's fighting with them, that Fantasy Grounds will parse that. It'll know if this character is good or not. And also your race is populated and your size. Those are the main things. Your log sheet is for Adventures League. So if you play that, that's what that's for. And then here's your actions tab. So at this point, I'm going to change the ammo to 20 for the light crossbow and the 2 throwing hammers. And then here's all your spell slots. If you want to prepare those, you can by going into, right now I'm in standard and the display is group. But if you cycle through this, you have a preparation mode and then you have a combat mode. So those are the different modes. For standard modes for building, preparation is for setting up your spells that you're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare those 4 spells. I could probably have a few more, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. And then I'm going to go back to combat mode and display as action. So you got all these buttons here for your spells, and then you also have these to tick off when you are using your spells. So if you use Bless, first thing your game master wants to do is put your character on the combat tracker. This is how you test things out. So he's on the combat tracker. I'm going to go ahead and click Bless, but I'm going to drag it to him because it can be something that is targeting more than one person, and it affects him or his allies. So yeah, the effect, it worked here. It'll change things mathematically. It doesn't change the sheet. So whatever math is applied to the saving throws and the attack rolls will be done automatically. So once you've done that, then you are going to check off the spell slot. Now, if you use one of your cantrips, obviously you don't. So basically, that's your basic build. Dwarven Cleric with his equipment, a little bit of customization, you're ready to go. The character builder is not the 100%, but it's close. So get used to it if you want to crank out some good characters. But I do recommend you learn about Fantasy Grounds before you start building races and all that other stuff. It's kind of a backwards way to do things, but if you have to create a special class or a race or so, you can use the existing. So if you wanted to build something that's like a character that you need, but you don't have the books or something, you can do it. It's doable. You just have to go to the options, and then you're going to view all the other stuff that's not on there. So you go to sidebar, and then you click all, and that puts out all the different banners. And you could have done this in the beginning, but I didn't think it was necessary. And then if you want to build a race, let's just say under races, let's say you wanted to build a different type of elf. So under races, you would see the elf here. You can actually drag and drop and make a copy of it. Open it up. You'll be able to edit it at this time. And then you would put in your changes appropriate. So right now, you'd probably build another subrace of an elf. And then you would assign anything that it would get. So that's just an example. It's doable. It just takes a little time to get your mind wrapped around the system. But I think I rambled enough. So there is a first level cleric. One last thing is if you want to level up. So let's say it's time to go to level 2 or level 3. So you click on the magnifying glass on the character sheet. And this is manual. It's not an automatic thing. Go click on level up when your game master says it's okay. And then you just come in here and you look to see if there's any changes that need to be made. We don't have to change anything, so we'll just hit save. And all that did was add extra hit points and that sort of thing to the character. So that's basically what you do to build a character. Hopefully this is helpful to you and that it makes things easier on you. So keep going on, and hopefully this stuff will start sinking in. Again, this is Founder Leyron, and I am with Fantasy Grounds Academy.